Now, for additional information about our topic, let us now go to Americans' political culture. In Americans' political culture, few of them don't believe in the words of Abraham Lincoln where he says, government by the people, for the people, and of the people. The reason behind this is some of them sees the government as a greedy and corrupt institution that is only focusing on lining their own goals. The American people has the same idea with Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan that depicts the government as a giant tower over its land, not knowing if it is a threat or its savior. In our country, we also experienced the same question during the former President Rodrigo Duterte's reign, where many lives were taken, and this is because of the Tokhang and his war against drugs campaign. There goes the question asking, was he our savior or our madman? Who knows? The American political culture is a system of shared belief traditions, customs, and beliefs and values. It describes the relationship between the American people and the American government. It includes several important principles such as liberty, which is the right to be free as long as others' rights are not being harmed or violated. Like other countries and its citizens, America has their values, and these are democracy, liberty, equality, and justice. In America's political context, the values democracy, liberty, and equality are being valued, but not in general for everyone. This is the turning point of America having the Republican and Democrats conflict arose. The partisans of Democrats and Republicans has two contrasting political ideologies, and these are liberal and conservatives. Some are conservatives and tend to vote Republican, and some are liberal and tend to vote for Democratic. Some have the negative attitudes toward public officials than others do. These attitudes determine how Americans participate, whom they vote for, and what political parties they do support for the upcoming election.
The term political culture is not new in the discipline study of socialization. Yet political culture plays a vital contextualization of general political ideals, turned into feelings, beliefs, motivations, and basically the whole collective sentiments of a population that defines the political process of a state and its underlying notion of elements that influence the government, such as history, shaping the population's political perceptions and attitudes. In his study of political culture and political development, American political scientist Lucian Pye defined political culture as the composite of basic values, feelings, and knowledge that underlie the political process. Hence, the building blocks of political culture are the beliefs, opinions, and emotions of the citizens toward their form of government. You are all aware that politics extends to the definition of distribution of powers, certain types of authority, and the political spectrum of an institution. Yet how do all these elements influence the notions of a society to have a similar identity of political culture? In the Philippine context, Cristina Montiel of the Philippine Journal of Psychology provides two components of Filipino political culture. First, the subjective components in the political process, such as: first, ideology-inspired shared interpretation of political events. Examples are perceptions vary on the VFA between the US and the Philippines that it may be a colonial intervention. Next, mental scripts of Padrina systems, serving political campaigns to gain contracts and networks. Third, negative emotions towards out-group members. Examples that political groups in the Malacanang have prejudices of plotting against each other. Fourth, collective memories, such that anti-Marcos still oppose how constitutional changes may be used to rationalize the declaration of martial law. And fifth, religious beliefs. On the other hand, collective components are political practices of politicians. As an example, an invitation of a prominent clan may provide opportunity of helping each other during campaigns. Second, political language as a symbolism. It provokes and stimulates the mass or public on who they choose to be their leader. Duterte as a strongman is an example of his profanity and use of language. Third, political artifacts. In the context of communication, it symbolizes the streaming of banners, colors, or jingles of certain political groups.
The essence of politics is talk or interaction. Broadly defined, political communication is the role of communication in the political process. It can take place in a variety of forms. It can be formal or informal, in a variety of venues. It can be public and private, and through a variety of medium. It can be mediated or unmediated content. It includes reproduction and generation of messages by political actors. the transmission of political messages through direct and indirect channels, and the reception of political messages. Political communication is a process that includes political institutions and actors, the news media, and importantly, citizens. Every act of political communication produced by parties, interest groups, or the media is geared toward citizens to inform them and to influence them. It is the interaction between these three groups that matter in political communication. Within politics, communication flows move in many directions: downward from governing authorities to citizens, horizontally between political actors, including news media, and upward from citizens and groups to the political institutions. Political communication has always been central to the electoral and policy-making process, but since the early 1990s, certain important developments have fundamentally altered this process, particularly post-war trends in the mass media moving from the traditional world of newspaper, radio, and television broadcasting toward the internet. In short, political communication is concerned with being actively engaged with local, regional, state, national, European, and international issues and how the power of information, persuasion, and strategic message design can be used to understand and affect outcomes at those levels, particularly in the area of governance and governmental and societal behavior.
According to Technum Social Science Journal, there are four phases of evolutions of political communication system, namely the age of the newspaper, the age of the television, digital era, and new media user. The first evolution is called the age of the newspaper. Under the age of newspaper, political message has more substance. Political messages enjoyed large access to the media at that time, but only selective people had privileges to respond to the messages. Local campaigning is done through door-to-door propaganda. Age of television, the second phase of evolution. The public began engaging since the messages reached more audiences compared before. It promoted fairness because television is the medium of political message and became a way for people to carefully choose who to vote and become rational. TV news has a large impact and paved the way of using media in the future to relay political messages. Digital era, the third phase of evolution. Coordinated national campaigns using connections such as reporters or actors that belong to a certain group or marginalized sector in order to relay their political messages effectively. Narrowcasting involves direct communication using following outlets such as media, magazines, emails, etc. Permanent campaigns, the use of state institutions to maintain their popularity and relay political messages. New media user, the fourth piece of evolution. The communication channel has come a long way from classical means, the public engagement, to actively participate in political activities or protest actions that challenge the government itself. In this space of political communication, the public are not just listener or receiver, but they can also interpret the messages and they can also influence their fellow citizens.
According to abcnews.go.com, there are 5 examples of political communication. First is the radio. You can hear the jingles of the politician when the election period is coming. They use catchy sounds, tones, lyrics, and sound effects just for you to remember what are their names and their platforms. Second is the direct mail. It came from a candidate, maybe campaign committee or an advocacy group. Sometimes it is just not an envelope that contains information about the letter where it came from. Sometimes it is they send it to you for you to know what are their platform and to for you to also promote them in the public. Third is the email. It is very dangerous and difficult to figure where they come unless you have a hacker skills. Read them and try to figure out who sent them. Fourth is the internet. This is the very cheap and easy way for the politicians to communicate to their voters. Candidates can have their own websites containing their advocacy platform and what they have done in their past administration or term, maybe in their life. Lastly is the pamphlets and flyers. It is the voter's guide you might get from the local, state, and political groups that you might have seen in the streets.
Political participation. Political participation is broadly defined as any action a citizen takes to influence their political system. Citizens can participate in politics in a variety of ways that do not include running for office. Political participation is valuable for most forms of government, but it is valid for a healthy democracy. While voting is the most obvious form of political participation, there are a wide variety of ways for citizens to have their voices heard outside of election season.
Political participation includes a broad range of activities through which people develop and express their opinions on the world, on how it is governed, and try to take part in and shape the decisions that affect their lives. One of the goals of political participation is the participation of people with disabilities in political and public life on an equal basis with others. Ordinary people can participate in politics, and every individual has the right to participate, including with people with disabilities. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Article 29, on participation in political and public life, mandates that states parties shall guarantee to persons with disabilities political rights and the opportunity to enjoy them on an equal basis with others.
There are different types of participation. First is about political efficacy. The concept of political efficacy has played a prominent role in studies on political behavior and political socialization. Political efficacy is the feeling that political and social change is possible and that the individual citizen can play a part in bringing about this change. It is according to Campbell, Gorin, and Miller. And the other one is about the affordability. Well, in civic participation is the involvement of individual constituents or communities in local, state, and national government. Civic involvement can include voting, political activism, volunteering, and community engagement. In short, it is the participation of people in government and democratic process. There are different barriers to political participation. First is about poverty. Poor people are mostly focused on survival activities. Their basic needs often need to be met first before they can participate, so they may have limited time or interest. Second is about education. Without information and knowledge, meaningful participation in politics can be difficult. Third is about social isolation. There is a limited network to support and encourage political participation. Fourth is about personal factors. People may have limited confidence or motivation to participate.
Stigma and discrimination. Majority groups may have prejudices, fears, and discomfort towards people with disabilities and therefore may not support their participation. Lack of disability-friendly processes. Access barriers can make it difficult for people with disabilities to participate, in example, inaccessible voting booths. Lack of role models. In many countries or communities, there are few examples of people with disabilities in high-profile political positions. Legal barriers. In many countries, people with disabilities are not permitted to vote, in example, people with mental health problems.
There are different forms of popular participation. First is about looking for information in newspapers, magazines, and reference materials and judging its accuracy. Second is about voting in local, state, and national elections. Third, participating in a political discussion. Fourth is about trying to persuade someone to vote a certain way. And lastly is about signing a petition.
One of the importance of political participation is first to gain a better understanding of the community's needs and aspirations. Second is diverse perspectives empower decision making. Third is community engagement increases transparency.
Fourth, in the public participation, why is it important? Because community engagement helps your initiative to run smoothly. And lastly, is create a greater sense of community ownership.
According to Katz, elections are the defining institution of modern democracy. During the election campaign, voters are the masters and are viewed as such. The most prominent role of elections is to promote competition for office and a mechanism for keeping winners accountable. However, not all elections are competitive. Most authoritarian leaders keep a legislature and usually use controlled elections to fill seats in their assemblies. The scope of elections in established democracies is an essential subject to ask. Consider the United States and the United Kingdom. The United States is remarkable in its many elected posts, from the president to dog catcher. Voting in the United Kingdom, like in many other non-federal democracies in Europe, has been limited to elections for European and national parliaments and local councils. Another essential feature of elections is the franchise, or those with the right to vote. In most democracies, practically all people 18 and above have the right to vote. Criminals, mentally challenged, and non-citizen inhabitants, such as guest workers, are barred from voting. The criteria for translating votes into seats are the subject of the most debate regarding electoral systems. Under plurality and majority or non-proportional systems, parties are not rewarded by their vote percentage. Instead, the winner takes all within each district. In simple plurality, or the first past the post, the leading candidate will be elected on the first and only ballot. While in the absolute majority, or the alternative vote, the voters rank candidates. If no candidate wins a majority, the bottom candidates are eliminated, and their votes will be redistributed according to second preference until there is a majority. Then, there is proportional representation, whose guiding principle is representing parties rather than territories. Proportional representation has a list system, where votes are cast for a party slate of candidates, although in many countries, the party slate is not voted on. Voters support individual candidates on the ballot. In comparison, the single transferable votes voters rank candidates in their order of preference. The candidate needs a minimum number of votes to win the election. Chosen candidates who surpass the quota are elected. The mixed system is a combination of plurality and proportional representation systems. This hybrid strategy seeks the best of both worlds. Mixed member majoritarian is where electoral districts elect specific candidates, whereas proportional representation selects others. Typically, each elector has two votes. One is for the district election, which naturally follows the plurality system, while the other is for a public relations battle. In the additional member system, on the other hand, the number of seats each party will win is determined by the party's vote. In some ways, the methods for selecting presidents are straightforward. A one-person presidency is an unshareable position. Many countries, like the United States, use an indirect election method through a particular college. The Philippines elects on a national level ahead of state, the president. The president is elected for a 6-year term by the people. What is voting behavior? Voting behavior describes how individuals participate in voting in elections. Several factors influence voting behavior. These factors may be classified as socioeconomic factors and political considerations, including religion, language, leadership style, the ruling party's accomplishment, and the party's identity and ideology.
Turnout. The voter turnout rate is a formula that expresses how many eligible voters cast ballots in a particular election. In United States, a wide range of criteria is considered when calculating voter turnout. The overall number of votes cast is a factor. This ratio shows how many votes were cast in a jurisdiction compared to how many people were entitled to vote there. This rate is calculated by dividing the number of ballots cast for the highest office in a jurisdiction by the number of eligible voters in that jurisdiction. Another factor is the total votes cast for the highest office. The president is the highest post up for election in any state during presidential election years. The highest office of the ballot in non-presidential election years varies from state to state. Referendum. Elections are tools of representative democracy where the people's job is to determine who will decide. Direct democracy instruments such as initiative and recall allow people to determine matters for themselves. Referendums, on the other hand, is a request for resolution from another entity, usually the government, to the people. As a result, the device serves as a realistic counterexample to the commonly held belief that direct democracy is unworkable in huge governments. Elections in new democracy. Elections that are free, fair, and competitive appear to differentiate a new democracy more clearly than anything else. The first election following the overthrow of dictators is typically a well-turned-out event that announces the start of new administration. Such founding elections are significant more for their ability to legitimize the new regime than for their outcome. Such founding elections are crucial for their outcome and their potential to legitimize the new rule. Second and subsequent elections, on the other hand, provide a more persuasive test of effective democracy consolidation. That the vast alliances that brought down the previous rulers quickly disintegrated when the struggles of heroes like Nelson Mandela in South Africa eventually retired. Elections in authoritarian states. Elections are described as contests for office, but in authoritarian systems there are no real opportunity for choice. Candidates are put before under authoritarian system for approval without the appearance of choice. Elections in authoritarian governments are frequently only marginally contested, with the predetermined winner and electoral fraud contributing to achieving the intended outcome. Elections that are only moderately competitive combine choice and control in the matter of typical authoritarian or partially democratic state.
Now let's discuss interest group. So what is interest group? According to Wilson, interest group, or also called pressure groups, are organizations which have some autonomy from the government or political parties and which try to influence public policy. An interest group or advocacy group is a body which uses various forms of advocacy in order to influence public policy or public opinion. They are different from political parties in that they do not run in elections. They typically adopt a pragmatic and often a low-key approach in dealing with whatever power structure confronts them. There are two ways of classifying interest groups. The first one is the protective groups. They represent clear occupational interest. Protective associations are often the most influential of all interest groups. They are well-established, well-connected, and well-resourced. While the second one is the promotional group. They advocate ideas, identities, policies, and values. What are the differences between the two? Membership in protective groups is restricted, while promotional groups are open to anybody. In protective groups, only group members will benefit. It is selective, while in promotional, benefits can go to both members and non-members. Let's proceed to channels of access. How are interests communicated to political decision makers? What are channels through which this process takes place? The figure shows that there are three mechanism characteristics of established democracies: direct dealings with government, indirect influence through political parties, and indirect influence through public opinion. Interest groups are also known as lobbies. Lobbying is one of the ways in which interest groups shape legislation and bring the views of their constituents to the attention of decision makers. We also have iron triangles. American political scientists use the term iron triangle to describe the particular form taken by the relationship between groups and government in the USA. There are 3 points of the triangle. The first one is the congressional committees. It gives funding and political support to the federal bureaucracy. And the second one is the federal bureaucracy. It gives congressional committees the policy choices and executes that policy. And the third one is the interest groups. It gives the electoral support in the form of donations to the congressional committee's members. Interest groups use iron triangles to provide the government with policy knowledge, lobby the government, and provide government officials with campaign donations. All of these activities are intended to influence the government policy.
Pluralism assumes that diversity is beneficial to society and that autonomy should be enjoyed by different functional or cultural groups within a society, including religious groups, trade unions, professional organizations, and ethnic minorities. It was stressed in England during the 20th century as writers argued that, on the other hand, corporatism is the theory and practice of organizing society into corporations subordinate to the state. This is monitored and guided by the state in modern society and political authority in traditional society. Interest groups are essentially valuable in representing and supporting those groups whose views are not effectively represented by any of the political parties, in providing specialized information that can help public agencies on making public policies, and in serving as watchdogs over legislation that public officials might try to implement but are erroneous or self-serving.
So, I'm here to discuss about political parties. So, have you heard of it or any clue what it is? Or if wala, I'm here to discuss it. So, political party is basically a group of people wherein this group of people come together and contest election in order to hold a power sa government. It is a way to mobilize voters to support common set of interests, concern, and goals. The primary role ng political party is to fix the political agenda and policies. So each party tries to persuade people, the voters, by claiming na mas maganda yung policies na in-offer nila kaysa sa iba. So, para nga manalo, you have to kuha the heart of the voters na mas maganda yung policy ko, ikakaunlad to ng Pilipinas, so botohin nyo ako. So, in broader perspective, political parties means by which the people can speak to the government and have a say sa governance of any country. Every political party must have 3 components. Hindi mabubuo ang political party kung wala tayong leaders, wala tayong active members and followers. Halimbawa, hindi mabubuo ang partido ni Lenny kung wala siyang active members, wala siyang supporters. Halimbawa na din kung hindi mananalo si BBM kung walang voters na nagkakagusto sa kanya o walang supporters na magkakagusto sa partido niya. So, let's proceed sa function ng political party. Political party contest election by putting up candidates. So, hindi magkakaroon ng election kung isang candidate lang yung nagre-run sa election. So, candidates are chosen by party members and supporters by nation like sa USA. While naman in countries like India, yung candidates are chosen by the top party leaders. So, every party has different policies and programs. So, dito tayo magkakantuhan. So, hindi pare-parehas ang ino-offer ng party ni Lenny, party ni BBM, party ni Isko. Kaya nga eto sabi dito, voters make a choice in accordance with the policies and programs like by them. So, konektado yan. Every party has different policies and program. Kung gusto kong ipaunlad ang agrikultura ng Pilipinas, boboto ko dito. Kung gusto ko naman kung gusto ko naman ipaunlad sa tingin ko na ang policies niya is mapapaunlad yung Pilipinas, syempre boboto ako sa kanya. Kaya nga, nanalo si BBM dahil maraming nagkagusto ng program niya. May mga bumoto rin kay Lenny, may bumoto kay Pacquiao, may bumoto kay Isko dahil gusto nila yung policies na ino-offer ng partido nila. So, in a democratic country, a large group of people that have certain opinions group together and form a party. Hindi pwedeng magiging under ako ng isang partido na sumusuporta sa federal government. Pero ako ay hindi ko sinusuporta ng federal government. Magkakagulo ang thoughts and opinion ng nasa loob. Halimbawa, mag-uupo sa ako kasi hindi ko gusto ang ino-offer na policies ng partido ko. So, kailangan kong lumipat sa ibang partido na hindi sumusuporta sa federal government. So, political party shape public opinion. With the help of advocacy group, the parties launch movement for solving problems faced by the people. Parties even offer access to government machinery and welfare scheme. The local party leaders, serve as link between the citizen and the government office. So, that's it. That's the political party and the function of it. So, let's proceed to my partner, Christine. She'll discuss about the importance and the different types of party system. Christine?
Thank you, Ravelin. So, hi everyone. Let's proceed to the discussion. And today, I will be discuss the importance of political parties. Political parties are important because a democracy cannot exist without the presence of political party. This is evident from the role that political parties play. In case there is no political parties, then there would be no independent candidate in this election. Any candidate cannot effectively promise the public a significant change in government policies. In such a case, nobody would be in charge of managing the nation. And if without political party, only representative democracy can survive in the long run. Political parties are organizations that assemble various points of view on certain subjects and propose them to the government. In political party, we have party system. A party system is a concept in comparative political science concerning the system of government by political parties in a democratic country. We have three different party systems: the one-party system, two-party system, and the multi-party system. In one-party system, there is no any competition under a one-party system. Here, there is only one party that nominates candidates, and there are only options available to the voters. First is not voting at all, and the second is write yes or no against the name of the candidates nominated by the party. This party system has been prominent in authoritarian regimes and communist countries such as China, North Korea, and Cuba before the collapse of communism. This system was also widespread in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, also known as the USSR or the Soviet Union. We also have two-party system. In two-party system, the power shifts between two major parties. Therefore, in order to win the election, the winner must receive the most votes. Remember that the maximum number of votes is not equivalent to a majority of votes. The smaller parties tend to merge with the bigger parties or they drop out the elections. Such a parliamentary system prevails in Canada and Great Britain, in which there are two parties holding the maximum number of seats. The last type of party system is the multi-party system. The multi-party system is the third and the most prevalent type of government in this system. There are three or more party systems which have the capacity to gain control of the government separately or in a coalition. In multi-party system, no party achieves clear majority of the legislative seats. Several parties join forces and form a coalition government. Countries like India and Philippines follow a multi-party system. Some people say that a multi-party system often leads to a political instability in a country. And that's it, the end of the discussion in political parties. Thank you very much and I hope you learned something.